Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the June 18th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item, Council, I have on the agenda tonight is that the June 18th Council meeting agenda. Oops, I've skipped a page. The heat has got them stuck together. First item I have is the minutes of the council meeting held June the 6th, 2018 be adopted. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next item is the approval of the agenda, that the June 18th, 2018 council meeting agenda be approved. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Proceeding on to new business, if you will allow me, Council, I have a number of items tonight. First of all, for members of the audience and those watching on the screening, we will not be hosting an event on National Indigenous Peoples Day this week. Parksville Council and the Nanu's First Nations will work together to create a meaningful celebration on June 21st, 2019, with more lead time and planning. Second item is on Wednesday this week, Chesapeake Shores will be filming in the community park, on the beach, and along the waterfront walkway from the gazebo to Arbutus Point. They will be there from early morning until dusk, and parking along Beachside Drive will be limited. Accessible parking will still be available, and the waterfront walkway will be open as usual. Might get to be on a TV show. Third item is the public hearing for the 22 Corfield Street is set for tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at the Parksville Community and Conference Center to consider public representations on the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018 number 2000.116. The purpose of the proposed amendment is to alter the zoning for 222 Corfield Street South from the high-density residential RS3 zone to the comprehensive development CD27 zone. Next item, the public is invited to attend the official opening of the new splash park in the community park, scheduled for this Friday, June the 22nd at 2 p.m. There will be an opportunity to check out the new splash park and also an opportunity for the city to thank the donors and sponsors to this project, as well as acknowledge the fundraising efforts of the Parksville Lions Club and the Rotary Club of Parksville AM. Next, Canada Day celebrations in Parksville are being organized by the Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce. The details of activities may be found on their website. Next, property taxes are due July the 3rd. Notices were emailed in May, and the homeowner grant should be claimed before July 3rd. After July 3rd, an outstanding balance will receive an immediate 5% penalty. More information can be found on the city's website page and Facebook page. And lastly, Legion Week has been proclaimed as June 22nd to June 28th, including July the 1st. More information is available at the local Legion. So other items under new business, I'm going to start with Councillor Patterson, and thank you for chairing that last meeting while I was freezing to death in an eastern province.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really don't have a great deal of things going forward. I'm just wondering if anyone around the table knows how many years that Parksville has been incorporated as a city, because that's going to be happening later this month.
How many years? How many?
Anyway, the next time we meet, that'll be your homework to find out,
we'll
because
I just have to check
my
those
records
pictures.
show that if you're walking in the downtown core and on some of our lightscapes and things, it definitely says when we were, and that date's coming up very soon.
Great, thank you. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Worship. No, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to plow new fields. I've been pretty caught up in some of the issues that are going on currently. As to you being in the other province, I don't know what you were thinking when the guy that lived there for all those years wouldn't even go, and then you went anyway. So, you know, you got what you deserved.
I had to buy toques and mitts. That's another story. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I meant to bring it along, but I forgot that part. But the Vancouver Island Regional Library is totally prepared for the summer reading program. So if people are interested, don't know about it, please check it out. And always keep in mind, especially parents who have kids that you want to have part of the program, keep in mind that Vancouver Island Regional Library covers all of the island just outside of Victoria and Esquimalt, so it includes Saanich, Sydney, and North, and even Haida Gwaii and Bella Bella. So if you're anywhere, you can absolutely take part, and there will be some great activities throughout the summer with that. Also, a little bit later in, well, it's July. I'll leave that for another time. But there's some exciting exhibits starting up at the Macmillan Arts Centre as part of the Oceanside Community Arts Centre. Some really, really exciting things, so you won't want to miss those. That's all I have right now.
Thank you. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't have a lot to report. Just reminder that the Sunday market down at the museum is happening, and yeah, it's apparently going very well, and they're bringing in more members.
Thank you. Councillor Burden.
Nothing significant, although I think maybe we should have cake tomorrow night at our public hearing because Parksville was incorporated on June the 19th, 1945.
I was a year old. Okay. Okay, Council. Tonight we're going to have a double whammy from the RCMP. I'm going to ask, first of all, Staff Sergeant Pelletier to give us the background on the issues regarding Oceanside RCMP Incident Statistics Update. Staff Sergeant Pelletier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've provided everyone with a status report for the Oceanside RCMP, and it just basically breaks down our human resources here for Parksville, Qualicum, and the RDN. Just flipping over to the next page, what's of concern here for us is that if you look at the theft from motor vehicle in 2016, there was 43, 37 in 2017, and we're up to 60 here in 2018. Huge increase, and that goes for the theft overs, 36, 24, and now in 2018 we're up to 68. And if you look at mischief for business, 25 in 2016, 40 in 2017, and 89 in 2018. And that includes, when you look at mischief, we're also talking about broken windows, but it's also the tagging. It's also the spray painting. That's considered a mischief. For our files, that is considered mischief. So that's brought up the huge amount of calls for mischief on that. And relatively everything else is more or less the same. There's nothing really. If we're looking at the April 2017 to March 2018, again, the break and enter to business, we had 42 in 2017, jumped up to 74 in 2018. And there goes the mischief for 431, and it jumped up to 581. So every time we put away one criminal, there's 10 more that can come in and replace them. So it's a constant battle that we're dealing with. And because of that, if you look at our prisoner count, in 2016, we only had 343. Last year, it went up to 412. And right now, we're at 197 to date. So we're at the half the year. So we're going to hit that 400 mark again. But what's really concerning here is a Crown Council report. So a Crown Council report is what we're actually charging somebody. So if you look at 2016, 343. 2017, last year, we jumped up to 450 Crown reports were forwarded. And right now, to date, we're at 201. So that is huge. That's time-consuming for our members. That's the break and enter guy that we're catching him for break and enter, breach of probation, mischief. Multiple charges are going forward. If we take a look at the example of the bank robber we caught the other day, he robs a bank in Qualicum. He smashes 2 of our police cars in a stolen car. So he's got flight from police, ramming police, bank robbery, breach of probation, multiple charges, very time-consuming for our members, and also involves our ident comes up. Our police dog services have to come up. Lots of money are being forwarded to catch these type of guys. But if we don't, what's his next thing? He's just going to rob another bank. So, and calls for service, 5,400 in 2016. And this is just January to June. 5167 last year. And right now we're at 6,421, an increase of 1,254 calls in 6 months. That's 200 calls a month more that we're attending right now. And we're at the same man. I don't even know the last time we ever got another body for the detachment. I know we're lucky we're getting another body for our traffic member there in the fall. But at an increase like this, we're looking at like 200 calls a month with the same amount of guys that are responding for the past 10 plus years. So, and also, like say, what we've instilled is our curfew check, which is really working pretty good because we're getting a lot of guys off the street because of that. In 2016, before I arrived, they only did 389 for the whole year. Last year, we were able to do 2,218 curfew checks, and right now we're at 1,064 for half the year. So when we get a prolific offender, we send him to court. He's on whatever charges he's on. He gets out. He's got like a 9 o'clock curfew. We will constantly check him to make sure that he's home. If he's not home, he's breaching his curfew, and that's another charge. We'll go out, get a warrant for his arrest him, send him back to court. Now, whatever happens in court, that's out of my hands. That's out of the members' hands. They get released. They get another curfew. It's a constant wheel. It just keeps turning and turning. And like I say, we put one guy away. There's 10 more that replace him. So it's key for the members here that, like, when you look at the theft from vehicles, the days of leaving your keys in the vehicle and your wallet and your purse and not a big thing, not unlocked, those days are done here. They're past. We arrested a gentleman 3 weeks ago. He broke into a couple of cars by the bowling alley. He biked from there, broke into a police officer's car in the Lodgepole area, kept on biking, and he got caught up in Arrington. This is within 45 minutes. He had broken into about 4 cars. We ended up getting him. He had property from the police officer's car. He had property from the bowling alley. So, and then we put him away. Of course, he gets back out on curfew. We check him again. We put him away, check him again, put him away again, out. So it's a struggle for everyone. Everyone's frustrated. I know the complainants are frustrated. How come my car's getting broken into? I hear you. We're arresting the same guy over and over. So we're trying to do our end. But it's a battle. Keep in mind also that Parksville, Qualicum, the region, everything, this is a great community. We are not the Surrey here. Very safe, and we're just dealing with traveling criminals that are coming up and down the island, that are coming from the Victoria area, coming down from Comox. They're traveling through. They're breaking into everybody's cars, breaking into businesses, and they're moving on to the next town. So.
Okay, thank you for that, and that's very enlightening. Members of council, questions? Councillor Beale, Councillor Burton, Councillor Powell. Councillor Beale, you go first.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for the stats. Now, I know you've mentioned, and I had circled every one that you did mention, noting the uptick there, and looked like a pretty substantial increase. And but I'm curious as well about the motor vehicle collisions. If I read this correctly, there are 563 motor vehicle collisions. That's in a 2-month period.
No, this is from correct? April of 2017 to March of 2018.
Okay, so
11 months.
Sorry, I should look at that. Okay, so now is this, I guess it's gone down. Okay, so I won't worry about that too much. And is there any indication that some of the increase in calls is a positive in the sense that people are contacting the RCMP more readily now? I mean, sometimes you do hear from people like, oh, well, no, I didn't call. And I know myself, I always encourage people, please call, because people won't know what's going on unless someone calls. So do you see that
Yes,
trend?
we do, and I think that's why we're getting an increase in calls, is because of that. Every time we're telling you, call us. If you see a group of people hanging around, you don't think they're not in that neighborhood, they don't belong there, call us. Well, that becomes a call for service. So we're all for that. Like, call us anytime. No call too small. We want to attend. We want to find out who these guys are, if they're coming through town or if they're breaking into your vehicle. We want to be able to check them. So.
Councillor Burton and then Councillor Powell.
So I got a couple of things. You said that you hadn't had an increase of manpower. Now, we approved an increase in manpower in the last budget, but that number hasn't been realized yet?
Not as of yet. We're hoping by September.
Okay, and it's dedicated to traffic?
Traffic member. Our number one call is traffic complaints.
And that was one of my other points. I understand that 30% of your calls are traffic complaints.
That's correct.
Maybe we could get something out into the community that it would have an increase in police service if people learned how to drive. Just saying. 30% of police activity on traffic calls seems to me, I won't call it a wasted resource, but it seems to me maybe a bad priority when we have so many other issues in our community. And I'm looking at the April comparison, the April to March comparison, particularly on drugs, and it shows a decrease. And yet I continually hear from people who are impacted by what they perceive to be drug trafficking in their community. And I'm wondering how we can help you to decrease that further or to deal with that. The drug thing drives me personally crazy, okay? What do you need from us in terms of
what assistance? we need information like right now. If you see two vehicles meeting up, you see the transaction, please get their plates, call right away. Don't walk home and phone 20 minutes later, oh, I just saw something in the parking lot, I'm just going to say at McDonald's. I think they were drug dealing. Well, there's nobody there when we get there. That's 20 minutes old. You need to be, if you have your cell phone, call right away. Yeah, there's two guys right now. They're dealing right in front of me. Give a description to the telecoms person, and we'll attend as quick as we can. I mean, drugs are everywhere. This is not, Parksville isn't immune to drugs. There are drugs here in the Parksville Oceanside area. No doubt about it.
Well, just one more. You mentioned that you believe that the increase in theft from vehicles and those sorts of things is a result of people traveling up and down the island targeting this community. I'm assuming they're targeting other communities. Is this an organized effort?
These are just criminals. They're prolific offenders that they're getting kicked out of one town. We'll deal with a prolific offender here. We put so much, as we say, heat on him that he moves out. So where does he move to? He moves to Comox. Then he does crime in Comox. Comox does the same thing. They put heat on him, so now, okay, well, I might as well go up to Campbell River. So then he's up in Campbell River, and the same thing happens again. So they get moved around, but they're traveling up and down. They still have their buddies here in the Nanaimo, Parksville area. They go up to Comox, they make more buddies, and then they go up to Campbell River, and then they're back over. Then they kicked out of all that. Then they end up down in Victoria, and then Victoria kicks them out. So now they're back all over again. It's a chain. It's just, you know, it's a wheel that turns and it's nonstop. Like I say, we put one away. There's 10 more replacing that guy.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. And so the last time you were here, you did your report about the curfew checks, and you said that the criminals, you'd go in there in the middle of the night, and a lot of them were leaving because they were being checked.
That's correct.
And so is the program still worthwhile? Is that still happening?
Very much so. Okay,
and so how many people do you think you've chased out of town?
How many people have left?
Yeah.
I'm saying right now you're close to like the 15 to 20 that have actually left town, and others that are right now presently in jail. But all of a sudden we get 3 new guys that come in. I'll get a thing from probation saying, oh, this new guy's moved to your area here. He's on a 9 o'clock curfew. Where's he from? Oh, he's from Surrey. What's he doing here? Why is he here? Well, beautiful area. Yeah, we know it's beautiful. We just don't need him in Parksville. But so the criminals put away, they leave, new ones come in.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for coming before us. Recently, I noticed that we have some bike patrols in the community. Will that be just over the summer type period, and how many officers are?
Well, we're training. I'm putting on a bike course tomorrow. It's my first day of putting on another course. But yeah, the bike members are out, and we're trying to get them out as much as they can. Because a bike member can go to places where, let's say, a car can't go down, like certain alleys, and you can go back and you can actually sneak up on these people that are doing stuff like that. It's a great tool. The public love us out there on bikes, and yeah, we're out and about as much as we can. So.
Awesome. And a follow-up?
Sure.
Mischief. So it's kind of my pet peeve as far as tagging and things go in the downtown core especially. Does it need to be witnessed to
Yes, it
have
does.
a charge related? Because I know that some of the tagging is most definitely done by the same offender, but it can't be proved necessarily because it could be copycats.
Exactly.
And
That's why it has to be witnessed. That's why we have to have a business owner that says, I was just coming into my business, I see this guy, he's wearing white T-shirt, blue baggy pants, and he's walking away, and I just saw him spraying the wall. That guy will get arrested. If we get that call right away, but to say, I'm not quite sure who it is, maybe it was a kid with a hoodie on a BMX bike, there's no way we can arrest anybody for that.
Third follow-up. So when you come before council, do you come before some of the other organizations and groups in our community, like the Downtown Business Association, and give them the same kind of chat?
If they request it, yeah, I have no problem going to that.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your report. I'm just wondering a couple things. One, you stated that you still have not yet hired the FTE from last that we had already approved. Do you anticipate needing any more FTEs?
Well, we're just happy to try to get the other member coming here, hopefully by September. The RCMP works in strange ways, and it takes a long time to, get that wheel turning to get another members here. So, I'll take 10 more members, but, that's the cost of the cities. But it's a tough go for everybody. It's a tough for the complainants or victims out there, and it's tough on the members to keep dealing with the same person over and over again.
So do you anticipate needing any more FTEs, or just you're okay if you get your one?
I'm okay to get for one for this year, 2018. We'll talk in 2019.
And then my other question is with regard to people, whatever, breaking the law. Could you use video off cameras that are on businesses and so on?
We do all the time. Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. Constable Daly's going to.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Beal, and then Councillor Patterson, and Councillor Burden.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question about the role of restorative justice and if there is, if that is set up. And I am thinking particularly about the tagging, the vandalism that is associated with that. And if I can recount, I understood that a particular tagger had been caught and so on, and was quite surprised to learn that because it was a charge related to a specific location, none of the other areas that have been tagged with that tag will be attended to, and cleaning up all of those is not part of it. And it made me think about restorative justice and how that process works a little differently. Is that something that's being looked at? I know it's been in place here in the past, but I don't know how active it is right now.
Yes, we still have the restorative justice here in Parksville, and it works just great. We are trying to put as many, how would you say, like low crime issues through them, not to bog up the courts. So that's what we're trying to get, just trying to get them through restorative justice. It's a great, great program.
Okay, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Burden.
Thank you. I was just thinking that when you get another officer, in the past I've heard Parksville described as a good training ground for police officers when they're younger and coming out of academy or such. Is that still the case, or?
That is definitely not the case.
Okay.
I have told the staffing unit, I have told the staffing unit, do not send a recruit to Parksville, because this is a great place. We have basically, on a scale of with other towns, we have zero crime. The officer doesn't learn anything, and he spends 3-4 years here, and he has done basically nothing compared to a member that's up in Prince George, for a 4-year member from Prince George, compared to a 4-year member out of Parksville. If he's done his 0 to 4 here, knows nothing. So there's no recruits.
Ground, then?
This is retirement. This is where I'm coming at. This is where I'm looking to retire. So we want experienced officers. They shouldn't be coming right out of depot to Parksville. It's not good for them, and it's not good for the city.
Councillor Burton.
So you sort of answered one of my questions, which was, how does our crime rate here compare to a city of similar size, not Surrey, but say Powell River or maybe even Duncan?
Okay, we're not going to compare Parksville to Duncan because we are flying high. So Parksville is the place to live.
What do you mean by flying high?
Like, we've got no calls compared to what Duncan's going through.
Okay.
So we have got, this is, like, again, I'm repeating myself here, but Parksville, Qualicum, the Neuse area, this is zero crime. Like, I mean, we've got our crime, but nothing compared to those other towns. This is still the best place to live.
Well, we know that. We just don't want the criminal element knowing that.
And that's what I'm trying to do as well, so.
Before, Councillor Oates, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
With respect to staffing, if money wasn't an object, do we still not need to have the federal government pitch in some money too? Even if the city were to say we want to fund 5 new officers, could we do that?
I think if you request 5 new officers, I'll put everything forward to say, yep, the city wants it, and we'll see what the federal government can match to that. But the problem is, with the force in general, we can't keep up with the supply and demand. We've got 1,000 officers retiring a year, and there's like 600 recruits coming through. So every year we're going down 200, 300, 400 members. We can't keep up.
So the notion of because we're under the 15,000 mark and the federal government pays, what is it, 30% or something, is it? What do they pay? They pay 30% of the cost of an officer. There would be reluctance on part of the federal government to fund another officer their 30%. If they're going to take their 30%, they're going to put it into a jurisdiction such as you described elsewhere. So even if we had the money, I believe there's a barrier to us getting other officers. I don't know if anybody knows whether that's a fact or not, but that's what I understand. Because the federal government has a say in who they're going to fund, if they're going to put another officer in BC, it's likely not going to be in Parksville.
Exactly. Because of our crime rate. Because this is still a great place, and we are not the Duncans of the world here, and the Nanaimos. So if they're going to put another officer somewhere, they're going to put him down in Duncan.
Okay. And I really appreciate when you talk about the area being virtually zero crime compared to other locations. But, you know, those of us that are fortunate enough to live here can only compare it to here, and your own stats show that it's, you know, not as, if it's zero crime now, I guess it was negative crime a few years ago, but it's growing, the point, and you'll agree that it's growing. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't give the opportunity to ask you this question here tonight, seeing you might have heard that we're going through a zoning change for a supportive housing complex. I'm wondering if as a department, you believe that such a complex would have a facility would have a negative effect with respect to crime.
All we can do is we just go to where we're required. If there's calls for service on Corfield, we'll go to that. If there's calls for service out in the RDN, we go to that. We're not either or. We're not opposed to the homeless shelter, so it is what it is. Like, I mean, we just respond to the calls.
Thank you. And how, like, the community community wants a safe community, right? We all want a safe community. We all, I personally, I moved here from another place. I could have picked anywhere in Canada to live, and this is where I picked to live, right? One of the few Newfies will say the best island is this island. But, so we're very fortunate to live here, and we don't want to see our quality of life deteriorating. So is there anything that we as a city can do to put into your toolbox to help it? Is there bylaws that we can bring in? Are there best practices? Is there something that we can do that can, you know, bring us back the idyllic little city that we all desire? Or is this, you know, sign of the future? Is this, are we going to have to just suck it up a little bit as we move forward? Is there something what can we do as decision makers, the 7 of us?
If you feel you need to call for the police, please call right away. That's what's key. A lot of people, they wait to go back home. We need to be called immediately for us to catch anybody, because when we're 15, 20 minutes behind the call, you know how far you can bike in 20 minutes? Like, we're not even in the same time zone sometimes, basically. So
with a backpack full of stuff.
With a backpack full of stuff. So please have, you know, we want the people to just call right away. So
thank you very much for what you do. It's we're all in this together and appreciate it.
I know that you have trouble with the courts, in the sense that the courts, I know that we caught a tagger a few weeks ago or a month or so ago, and the penalty was year on curfew, which in layman's terms, in my opinion, isn't sufficient. I wanted council to know, and we'll talk more about this, but I want to do this before introducing Constable Daly, but I attended a session at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference. It's called Together for Safer Canadian Citizens. And the message that I attended at this session was very, very clear. Crime is not only the responsibility of the police, it's not only the responsibility of the city, it's the responsibility of all the citizens. Currently I have a block watch captain that's emailing me every day. I've asked him to do that. He came to see me at coffee with council a few months ago, and I said, please send me your reports every day, which he's doing. And it's fascinating to watch how this particular person is reducing crime in his area. He's finding cars that aren't locked. He's letting people know. He's finding lights that are out that need to be replaced, or in the case of cameras that aren't working. So I think that's really something that we want to focus on. I want to talk. I haven't talked to council very much about it, but I read here in Glasgow, Scotland reduced its homicide rate by 50%. Well, we don't have that problem in Parksville, but you'll talk about Glasgow in a moment. But it's suffice to say that this is going to be important that we all work together, and I truly believe that's the solution. And block watch used to be very popular, and I think we've got to bring that back in great number. But I don't want to anticipate what Constable Daly is going to talk about. But what I would like to do, Staff Sergeant Pelletier, is that in talking to, we're getting ready to go to the UBCM conference in early September. And I would like some input that we could meet with the Minister of Justice to give him some advice and some guidance. And that's going to have to come from, we don't have to quote you, or we don't have to quote the RCMP, but it has to come from our experience in Parksville. So if you can work together when we're doing a senior staff meeting, we can talk about that, and I'm going to be asking Mrs. Comas to bring that up in terms of what are the things that the courts could be doing differently that they're not doing now, and we can go to the Minister of Justice in September to talk to him about that. I think that becomes very important, and I don't know if you agree or not, but I'd like your.
I agree 100%. Yeah.
Okay. One more question from Councillor Beale, and then we got to go to Constable Daly.
Thank you very much. I just had a question about, I mean, it does sound and look like you're really quite stretched. You're really very busy. Nonetheless, is there a place for prevention and for increased prevention and I guess education around things? I mean, as much as, because a lot of this seems like response to a reaction to problems, and I know that things that one can do around your house to make it more secure. And I honestly notice, I don't know about other people, but pedestrians who don't seem to know the rules of the road for a pedestrian, cyclists who are riding on the sidewalk. That, like, there just seems to be a real lack of awareness of what the rules of the road are, never mind other things. And I just wonder if there is in your ideal world, would you have greater resources for some prevention and education?
In this community, we're lucky right now because we have Constable Daly here and with the whole Secure Us program, and it's a huge, huge help here for us in the thing. But keep in mind also when you look at all the advertising about drunk driving, you think today there'd be 0 drunk drivers on the street? There's something on TV every day, over and over and over about drunk driving, yet we catch drunk drivers all the time. You know?
Okay, we're going to move on, and Constable Daly is going to give us his Secure Parksville presentation, and I've heard this before, and I'm looking forward to it again. So, Constable Daly, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and Council.
Notice that Constable Daly has a little bit of an accent.
Yes, but Staff Sergeant Pelletier has very kindly agreed to stay on to translate should the need be. And Councillor Powell, who's just returned from Scotland, I believe, will be very comfortable. When Staff Sergeant Pelletier took over command of our detachment, he comes to us with a long and coloured history of property-related crime. And what he saw in the community was a need to create a bridge link between the responding member, the victim, and a more holistic member that could give a bit more time, a bit more care, a bit more attention to someone who's been the victim of, say, for instance, a break and enter. So Staff Sergeant Pelletier developed with us this programme which we called Secure Us. It's a kind of nice word, it's Secure Us, and it really talks to a lot about what you were saying, Constable Beale, about education, because what I see here in this beautiful, idyllic community, and like Councillor Oates, I came a long way to live here. I chose to be here. And we talked about Nirvana. This is it, guys, right? I transferred from Surrey and Richmond and the North Shore, and to be here is absolute heaven. So what we're guilty of is creating an environment that invites crime to our home, to our lives, to our community. An example of that would be when I talk about a crime, I like shapes. I'm a bit of a visual thinker, and I see a crime as a triangle. Down one side of that triangle you have a criminal. On the other side you have a victim. And taking up the bottom of that triangle is opportunity. Now, we heard Staff Sergeant Pelletier talking about, we arrest one guy, there's another 10 coming. And that's a horrible truth to our reality, that, it's like in Holland, the little boy with his finger in the dam, do you really stop it, right? We'd like to think we do, right? I'd like to think that I made a difference by locking these guys up, and trust me, we do. We are very, very proactive. Staff Sergeant Pelletier has us, street checking people every single day. We're on it, right? But what we have a need to educate the victim with a hope of removing the opportunity. And what would that look like? So I think we can accept that removing the criminal is a bit of a useless task, because they're always going to be there. But we can remove us, you, our community as the victim, and we do it by removing the opportunity. And some of the things that we see, classically, I see this on a daily basis. And here's an example of opportunity and inviting crime into your life. And we see that in the numbers, right? You're going to cut the grass, you open up the garage, you get out there, you start cutting the grass, you see Bill over the fence. Haven't seen him all year, how's things? You get chatting about the family. Before you know it, you're 40 minutes talking over the fence at the side of the house. Buddy boy on that bike, Councillor Oates, cycling about with a backpack, right, with no helmet. He's riding around, and what's he looking for? He's looking for opportunity. Because let me tell you something, we don't get targeted by James Bond baddies. You know, sitting in Errington, there's not a guy with a white cat saying, get to Parksville, we need big TVs. You know, we just get guys who come and take opportunity, right? And you've given them that. You have left your door wide open. Invariably, you have left your internal door open. Buddy boy cycles past twice. He sees you engaged chatting, you're not paying attention. He's in. He's right into the kitchen. I don't know about you guys, but that's where I leave my cell phone, my wallet, my car keys, right? My rings. They're all there on that little jar that we all have. Do you think they don't know that? Of course they know that, because we're all animals of a type. We all tend to live the same way. Those calls come into us usually about 6:30 at night. I think my house has been burgled. What do you mean you think? Well, I can't find my watch, my car keys, my wallet, whatever. I've been in all day. We go out, we investigate it, and we see that it's really what's happened, right? So we talk about crime, we talk about the public want somebody else to sort their problems. And I say this with the greatest respect to my community, which I live and work in. But sometimes you have to take responsibility for your own safety, your own security. You know, asking the city to do more. City, I expect you to do more. RCMP, I want you to do more. We can't do any more. We're flat out doing everything we can. What we need is the public in partnership with us to engage in their community and get involved in it. And that's at the very core of the Secure Us programme. What we do is we talk to modern policing was formed by, believe it or not, Sir Robert Peel, the Bobbies, in the 1700s, formed the Metropolitan Police. He set 9 principles of policing. Those principles of policing are as relevant today as they were 200-300 years ago. Number 1 of those 9 principles are the police are the people and the people are the police. You take this uniform off Staff Sergeant Pelletier and myself, we're just you guys, we're just the public, right? So we're no different than anybody else. We don't have superpowers, right? What we need is to get our public to engage. Why are we seeing more calls for service? Maybe the Secure Us programme is having a fantastic effect in our community, because I'm doing talks at least once or twice a week. I've done, I think we're at 78 home surveys where we go out to talk to vulnerable people. You know, my mum's got Alzheimer's, she won't move into a home, but she opens the door to anyone. How can you help us? Education, you know, having that robustness, you know. We are Nirvana. I can't think of a better place to live in Canada than here. And why are we targeted? Why are we so easy? Because historically we have left our vehicles opened, our windows open, our homes open, because that didn't happen here. Well, there's a new world reality for us in our community, and it does happen here now, and we have to step up to that responsibility and engage with the education and the support that this programme can give you. We can engage and connect with you at 2 levels. We can come out and do a talk and a presentation to stratas, to rotaries, to any groups or buildings, whoever feels necessary. A group of neighbours that want to put a barbecue on in the cul-de-sac, we can come and do that, and I am happy to do that. I will do that any day, any night, any time. That's what I will do. That's what I do. Secondly, and it's much more personal and intimate, is a one-on-one survey, and that's what we've done nearly 80 of them so far this year, and that's where I will come out and I will engage with people on a one-on-one basis. It started out as just for people who had been burgled and give them back that. You get a life before you're burgled and a life after. And people who have been burgled know what that's like. You know, if you've ever been burgled, you know, and then after that, you live differently at home, right? You know, and you put things away and whatnot. And we want to get people's confidence back again to live that life and love the home and love this community. So the Secure Us programme is about holistically advising our community in a very relaxed and very personal way. Nothing becomes more personal than you have a police officer in your home. You know, we're blessed to have Staff Sergeant Pelletier, because if it wasn't for him, these programs wouldn't exist. The support and help that we get from the very top to engage this and make it happen is outstanding. And I can talk all day, Your Worship. I know that, and I don't know at what point you want me to shut up, but it's probably about now.
But before you finish, I'd like you to tell council and the members of the audience about these new security cameras, which aren't expensive.
They're not, Your Worship.
And they're attached to an app. So would you
They're
spend
wonderful.
a moment doing that?
Yes, I would love to do that. We're always looking for innovative new ways to give our clients, our community, advice on keeping themselves safe. And we're seeing a huge uptake on people installing Wi-Fi enableable camera systems. There's very inexpensive now because of the way technology is. A couple of $100 will get you a hard drive, will get you 4 1080 HDP high definition quality cameras, daytime, nighttime, indoor, outdoor, hardwired, battery backed up. I mean, all the bells and whistles. And that has an app on your smartphone. So basically what you've got is 4 Staff Sergeant Pelletiers standing at the corner of your house 24/7. They are always monitoring it. If you pass them, the camera clicks and starts to record, and it will send an instant alert straight to your smartphone. So you could be anywhere. You could be in Australia. You'll get a bing on your phone. You can press your phone. You can look at that camera, and there's a live image of somebody in your yard wandering around. Now, that's a 911 call. That's easy. That's a B&E in progress. And that is very, very effective. Now, see if that guy is a fast runner and he manages to get away. The evidence is overwhelming. We've got the evidence. And the thing about this community, in general, our prolific offenders are known to us. And that is irrefutable evidence, and it gives people confidence. Could you imagine right now, everybody here tonight has got 4 cops standing in each corner of their house, because that's basically what it is, right? So somebody enters your property, bang, you've got them. And I've seen it. Horn Lake was being hit by a lot of B&Es out there. They're putting in these cameras, and I'll tell you, it's been fantastic. So, yeah.
Thanks very much. Members of council. Councillor Salter, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll make it quick. I don't want to keep you.
No, I'm fine.
I'm still wondering about you are anticipating requiring additional police, and I know that with the changes to legislation federally with regard to marijuana, what do you have anything in place, or is it up to the police to have anything in place with regard to driving? You know, you can't drink and drive. At this time, it's illegal to use drugs. It won't be illegal, correct?
No, that is correct right now, yeah.
But it won't be illegal to use marijuana once that legislation is through. So if I'm smoking pot now and then driving, what are you going to do? Is there a test that you can, like you do for drinking and driving?
They are training members for that as we speak. But it's not a common practice. We don't have that many officers that are able to do that.
So, but is there a test that I'm asking about, a test though that would provide without doubt, just like it does with drinking and driving? If I blow over 0.08, I've been drinking. Is there something like that you have those numbers, you have that data?
Right now, it's just a DRE person, and there's no a Alka test that you can blow into and say, oh my God, you've smoked so many joints. There's nothing like that at this time, that I know of anyways.
What is a DRE?
There's
Drug recognition expert.
Yeah. Okay, so it's somebody who, according to themselves, believes that you've been taking drugs.
No, they're trained to tell different types of drugs in the system. It's quite an extensive training they go through, and they can tell by looking at your eyes and various reflexes in your body to what type of drug the person has taken and to what extent. Then they go through a series of field sobriety tests which will challenge them from general cognitive behaviour, and they can tell from the eyes, for instance, if it's methamphetamine or heroin or something of that nature.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just wondering, though, do you know if there is any attempt to actually come up with a real test, though, because that's objective? Is there a test that is being worked on? Do
That's
you know
going to have to
anything
come
like
from
that?
Ottawa, and that's not in Parksville now. So
The
So you're
answer
not
is
aware?
yes, but it hasn't been developed.
And then do you anticipate any need for more police then once this legislation is passed?
we're hoping to train as many officers as we can in the DRE program, which will assist us in stopping those drivers that are high. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Oates.
I'm sorry, but I should have asked this of Staff Sergeant Pelletier earlier. With respect to drugs in this community, and I know you'd like to see them all eliminated, but if there was one drug you said that could come off the street here today in Parksville and that would solve a lot of our problems, is there a single drug that is there? Because I'm not, I'm just.
You're talking about the fentanyl?
No, if there's, what is the drug of choice of people here in Parksville?
Cocaine.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Just before you move on, the executive director of the PDBA is not here this evening, the Parksville Downtown Business Association, but she wanted me to tell those members in the audience and those members that are watching, if you own a business in the BIA, within the BIA, you can apply for grants for things like safety and facades and things like that. So I just wanted to conclude that with that comment on her behalf.
Can I just say we extend the Secure Us program to businesses as well. We have probably 40 now of business surveys that we've done to date.
Thanks very much. Thank you, and we'll see you again. Oh, Councillor Oates, one more for Councillor.
Well, Walter here, not a question. I'd like to make a motion. I move that staff prepare a report to Council on options for establishing a rebate program for households that install security systems in their residences.
And a seconder with Councillor Burton. Discussion on the motion.
Well, I think, that we're known as an easy mark. I want us to be known as a place, if you're going to come here in our town, you're likely going to be caught. And if this technology is available and this technology is as effective as we've been told it is, I think that the city could step up to the plate and provide some sort of a rebate program similar to our toilet program, the low flush toilets here. We're concerned about our water. And it's, let's make it uncomfortable for people to come in town here and do their thing. And if you come here, you're likely to be caught. So smile when you come to Parksville.
It's another way of flushing them out. Councillor Burton.
That was really good. A question for staff quickly. Can you tell us what the uptake recently has been on the toilet rebate? I'm guessing hardly any.
Thank you, Councillor Burton, through the mayor to you. We have a maximum every year, and we do max it out every year. I don't know the exact number, but I can find that out for you tomorrow. But every year we get a certain amount, and we usually reach that in the fall, where we've hit the maximum number of rebates that we can provide.
Okay, I was hoping that maybe we wouldn't have to create a new budget number, but if that's the case, then we probably will. I fully support it. I agree with Councillor Oates that it's time that we made life as uncomfortable as possible for the reported very few criminals that we have. It doesn't matter how many we have. I'd like to make it as uncomfortable as possible for people that are here. I understand the revolving door syndrome that you have to deal with. I get it. I'd like to see mandatory minimums in our world as well, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I fully support what Councillor Oates has proposed.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, and I too would like to support this motion and thank Councillor Oates for bringing this forward. And I do think that we have a model in place with the rain barrel rebate and the low flush toilets, so that I can imagine we don't have to, drain the bank. We can have up to a certain amount, and eventually, over a period of years, a much larger number of people in our community will be able to and will take advantage of this. So I don't know if we need a dollar amount at this point in time, or we can just leave this to go to staff and come back. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. See you in the near future. Okay. All right. The next three items we have come from all of this one man, Chief Norris, Mark Norris, Chief of our fire department. And I need to start off with, I need a mover and a seconder for the receiving the 2017 Parksville Volunteer Fire Department Annual Report. Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So, Chief Norris, you're going to start off with the annual report?
Your Worship, that's correct. I'll just get I've put some of it on slides here. I'm just going to get it going here. Okay, thanks, Your Worship, and members of Council. I'm happy to be here to present the annual report for the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department for the year of 2017, the past year. And I'll just go through our slides here. Just a reminder of our mission statement, our core values, and our motto. As the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department, we strive to protect and support the community by providing outstanding service in the areas of fire suppression, emergency response, member training, fire prevention, public education, and charitable community service. We base that on our core values of service and integrity, and our motto is pride, courage, passion, and teamwork in the work that we do. I'll remind Council that the vast majority of our members are volunteers, and they give up a tremendous amount of their time and ingenuity and know-how to keeping our community safe. Our fire protection area, we have the city of Parksville, which is, of course, around 13,000 residents now, and but we also have substantial contract areas with the regional districts, so a good portion of French Creek, which is up in this area here, and then we have Forno Road and Wild Green areas and San Perel area, and those areas are receiving also significant infill, and so we have a fire protection area where we're approaching about 20,000 people that we serve now. So I think that's lost sometimes in the fact we get compared constantly to cities of similar size. However, the actual population that we're serving as a fire department is considerably greater than just the population of the city of Parksville. Additional to that is the influx we get in the summertime when our resorts fill up in the community. It's great for the community, and we're happy to see guests here. But as those things happen, it also puts pressure on the service in terms of when the population increases. So as far as our organizational profile goes, we've had one significant addition this year, which is we've added the Fire Rescue Services Technician, which is our first paid sort of firefighter type position. And so we've added that position into the ranks now. So we have the 4 full-time paid staff and a part-time administrative assistant, and we try to maintain 45 volunteer members. So that number, occasionally we hit the 45 number, and then it fluctuates somewhat. So highlights from 2017, of course, it was our 75th anniversary in 2017, and in July of 2017 we had our open house and our show and shine at the fire hall, which was very successful, and we had different events and celebrated that throughout the year, but that was the main event that we held. Thank you to the councillors that were able to come out and show appreciation to our members, both present and past, on that day. We finalized our training tower plans in 2017. We awarded the contract for the replacement of our aerial ladder truck. We hired the fire rescue services technician. Our calls for service continued to be quite busy. There was a slight increase over the prior year, and we continued recruiting and with our challenges that we face in both attracting and retaining volunteers. So here's just an overview of what we have for personnel. So myself, 2 assistant fire chiefs, 1 administrative assistant, that's 0.6 currently, 1 fire rescue services technician rounds out the paid staff. And at the time I wrote this report, we had 38 volunteer on-call members, and our full strength in 2017 was 42, and we've added a couple of spots to that. For volunteer staff. So in terms of recruitment, in 2017 we recruited 11 new members, and we had 8 members leave over the course of the year. So this is a recruit class. This was the class that graduated last year in 2017. There's 1 person missing out of that photo, so there were 6 members in that class who graduated, and there's 4 with us now. So constant fluctuation in membership, in the volunteer membership. In terms of facilities and apparatus, we have the main fire station, just 1 fire station that serves the entire fire protection area at 160 Jensen Avenue West. And we have a training center at 1159 Franklin's Gull Road. We have 2 frontline pumper trucks or engines. We have 1 ladder truck. The ladder truck that we currently have will be replaced early next year when the new truck arrives with a truck with a longer ladder on it. We have 1 rescue pumper, which is due to be replaced this year. We have a water tender, a special operations trailer, which carries various equipment for confined space and rehab of firefighters and various other operations. And we have 3 utility vehicles. We also have a couple of historical pieces of equipment that are both housed at the museum. And 1 is a trailer pump from 1942, and 1 is pumper number 2, which is a 1950 Bickle Seagrave truck that was the members have restored over the last couple of years. In terms of operations, here's a graph showing our calls for service over the last 10 years. You'll note that we've seen over those 10 years the calls spike and then decrease slightly, and then spike and decrease slightly, and the last 2 years we've seen very steady call volumes. So I think when I presented last year, we were at an average over that 10 years of 15 calls per year increase, and this year it's 18 calls per year. So we're just incrementally growing as the community grows and infills. This graph's a little bit busy, but it just shows a comparison in when the calls are happening for the last 3 years. The blue line with the diamonds in it is last year. Our busiest months were definitely June through September, and a little bit in January. Some of that has to do with the weather and the population increase. So we've had winters where we've seen an uptick in motor vehicle accidents and things like that come with snow and ice and those sorts of things. Then of course it's getting drier in the summer, so we see more complaints, more concerns about fire or fire hazards, and more responses for those sorts of things. So in terms of calls for service, just as a quick overview, we saw an increase in 2017 in smoke in structures. So that could be anywhere from burnt food to things stuffed in electrical heaters or anything else that would cause smoke to come through out of the structure, but where we haven't had an actual serious major fire. Medical aid calls and ambulance assist calls are up. Hydro trouble was up. Burning complaints and concerns of fire hazards were up. And carbon monoxide alarms and concerns increased. Decreases, we saw a decrease in single-family structure fires, which was a good thing, and things like pedestrian and cyclist struck calls. And one of the things that we were really happy about was we saw a decrease from the year before in false alarms. And there's two categories of false alarms that we have. One is a nuisance, and the other is one where people do it purposely, so a malicious type of false alarm. So unfortunately, the malicious false alarms haven't decreased, but the nuisance alarms have. So that's the first time in a while that we've seen a significant decrease in that. This is a graph that shows where we're responding to calls. So 60% of our calls are in the city of Parksville, and 17% of them are in French Creek area, with 14% of them in what we call the local area, which is San Perel and Forno Road areas, and then 9% of them are in other jurisdictions, so to our neighboring jurisdictions, which would be mutual and or automatic aid calls as part of our agreements with those jurisdictions, so supporting our neighbors. Here's a breakdown of where we go for those automatic and mutual aid responses. So we had 32 in Arrington. The number in Arrington is larger because we do their rescue for them, their auto rescue. We covered that. That is actually the auto rescue piece, or the auto extrication piece, is something that we actually get reimbursement from the province for. So it's not a very nice revenue stream, but we do receive some revenue from that. And then some Coombs, we had 6 calls there, and Qualicum 3 calls. So it's a very similar, with the exception of the auto rescue, it's very similar reciprocal numbers coming back the other way, probably 12 or 15 calls where other departments were helping us in our jurisdiction. Our fires that we receive help for tend to be a little bit bigger. Ocean Terrace would be an example. We tend to have more larger, complex structures here in Parksville. Qualicum has some similar structures, but when we have large fires like that in buildings that are non-sprinklered and those sorts of things, it requires a tremendous amount of resources to manage it. Resources that we would rarely have on our own. So we do rely on our partners for that. So just a look at 2017, 2016 response time. So it shows a number of incidents there again, and our average dispatch times, muster times, are in around the 4-minute mark or just under. En route times, that's for the first fire truck to be en route to the call, and then total response time. So we're in around the 8-minute mark on an average. Of course, the farther away from the fire hall you live, the longer the response time is. So, we throw in the co-occurring incident clusters because they're growing. So co-occurring incidents means this is when we have one or more, or two or more, incidents happening at the same time. So this is another instance where sometimes we have to call mutual aid to help us out because our resources or our available members might be tied up doing something else, doing an initial call, and then we get a secondary call or a third call or sometimes a fourth call, and we need to call for help to do that. So it's just the point of that is really that those instances are increasing along with our call volumes. Shows the 2017, 2016 dollar losses. There was quite a bit more dollar loss in 2017. These are based on insurance values. The big one there again was Ocean Terrace, so that's why those numbers are so high. The 2016 numbers were more of an average. And then at the bottom, the incident response hours shows the 2017 and 2016 numbers in terms of the incidents. So we actually saw a slight decrease in the actual person hours we were on scene in 2017, which is a good thing. But we're a couple hundred hours there. So just some notable incidents from last year. Shows you a little bit of the diversity of things we do. Of course, we don't have medical calls up there. We don't want to show people's personal information, but medical calls make up a large amount of what we do. These were some, the 2 bakery fires we had, the Ocean Terrace fire, and a little bit, we had a rescue off the French Creek train trestle, which was interesting, and just shows some of the things, some of the technical things that our members do. Rope rescue requires extra training and a lot of extra time. In terms of fire prevention, we have approximately around 500 inspections due every year, and I don't have accurate numbers right now on the 2017 or 2016 inspectable occupancies, but they're well up over 800 now, and and that includes City of Parksville occupancies and those in the broader fire protection area, which we're contracted to inspect also as part of our contract with the regional district. So in 2017, 214 of the 530 due inspections were completed. So in terms of fire prevention, public fire and life safety education, we had 39 events in 2017, which was up. It was good. See, we were up from 2016. That translated into 448 hours, person hours, and over 1,000 citizens reached, so directly, so of all ages, from school-age children all the way up to seniors. And we investigated 16 fires in 2017. So training stats, this is where we put the bulk of our time in meeting our requirements, occupational health and safety requirements, as well as just meeting our training level standards. 2017, we did 8,265 hours of attendee training. 1,156 hours of instructor hours were put in there. So the total person hours, 9,421 over 433 sessions of training. That's where the major bulk of our time is spent. And you can just see the progression there. I think this year we'll probably end up somewhere around 9,200 where we're going right now. So just to conclude, we continue to have a highly effective fire rescue organization. We have a very dedicated and motivated group of volunteer on-call and paid staff. We're seeing steady, moderate growth in our call volumes. I think that comes with people want to move here, like my partners, my emergency service partners, the RCMP, were saying this is a very nice place to come to, and with that growth, we're going to see steady growth in our call volumes. With that steady growth in our call volumes, we're going to have challenges in regards to, retaining membership because of the time commitment that's required. We're at the leading edge of a transition right now that will happen over many years, but Council should be reminded that these call volumes are getting to the point where on-call staff are going to have difficulties meeting those commitments in terms of service. And those, as we add paid staff and our call volumes go up and all those things come together, we're going to face more facility pressures. And just finally, I'd like to thank all the staff at the fire department, both volunteers and paid staff, for the great work they do in our community, and I'd like to thank you all for your support.
I can assure you that there's no greater challenge you can make to anyone to go into harm's way. And as I said at a meeting we had a few months ago in front of all of the firefighters, a number of these firefighting men and women have children. and for them to go off into harm's way is remarkable, and they certainly deserve our sincerest thanks and appreciation for the work that they do. So I'd like to take that back to the fire department.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll certainly pass that along.
Now, just before, we have the 2018 report. I wonder if Council could hold their questions and we'll do 2018, then we can do 17 and 18 together. Is that okay for everybody while we're on a roll? So, Chief Norris, if you want to give us the latest stats on 2018 from January 1st to June 14th, please do so.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So I passed out just before, I shouldn't say I passed out, the executive assistant passed out a copy of the presentation to members of council just before the meeting here. So this covers off just quickly where we're at for 2018. The statistics are up to date to about the 14th of June. So these are the objectives that we have set for the large objectives that we had set for 2018. So we had a utility vehicle to replace. That's been ordered. We have a self-contained breathing apparatus replacement capital project, which is next on the agenda this evening. And we have a rescue pumper replacement project to do this year. We are posting a casual backfill position for the fire rescue technician so that when that person's on vacation or sick or training or whatever, that position is filled. When one of the main reasons for that position, amongst other things, is to having daytime staff in town, and so we have adequate personnel to respond to emergencies. Completing the training tower project is a big one. The training tower is on the ground now in the training ground, which is exciting for us. Maintaining our volunteer on-call membership levels, that's ongoing, never changes. We'd like to, once we have the training tower up and running, we'd like to develop some programs there, which is not only a possible revenue source, but that will assist us in providing mutual aid training to our neighboring departments, so that when they come into town to do high-rise operations with us and things like that, that they're trained. It's one of the things we have to do as a component of our mutual aid agreements. Focus on our company officer and firefighter development. We need to continue just finishing off our Class 3 licensing program so that our firefighters can drive our new aerial apparatus. And completing pre-incident plans for large or significant structures in our area. So our calls, this shows a 3-year comparison. So 2018 to June 14th, we have had 218 calls for service so far this year. That represents just over 1,000 person hours and 181 hours actually on scene. So it's right in the middle of the last 2 years. So if that demonstrates any trend, we're right on track to be right where we have been for the last couple of years. So, of course, there's really no rhyme or reason to when things happen in our business, and so we'll just sort of see what comes. So as far as where our membership are putting their time in, we have committee meetings like occupational health and safety, training and monthly meetings. So our training night is Monday night, and our crews are will have just left out of the building to go do their Monday night training session tonight. And then we have equipment and facility maintenance that are mostly our on-call members do, with some help from the fire rescue technician or some coordination there. And that accounts for 232 sessions so far this year, and 5,500, almost 5,600 hours put in so far this year. In terms of fire and life safety inspections, we've got 86 done this year, around 172 hours worth. Public education, we've had 5 sessions, and fire cause investigations, we've done 12 already this year. So some of our challenges. One of our challenges currently is beach fires. We've seen a bit of an uptick in responses to go and take care of fires in the wildlife management area. And of course, we're quite happy to action fires that are dangerous or pose some threat to either personal safety or people's property. The problem that we're finding with this is that we don't have jurisdiction there in terms of enforcement. So the Parksville Qualicum Wildlife Management Area is a provincial regulation. There's no fires permitted there, but we don't have any enforcement tools other than calling the Conservation Service. And unfortunately, they're not very well resourced, so they don't often show up. As you know, I'm sure there's quite a lot of bluff from basically Sutherland Crescent all the way to French Creek, and a fire at the base of those bluffs on the beach, as we get into the drier times of the year, could be significant because they burn quickly up the upslope and pose a threat to the properties above that. So we're scheduling a meeting with the wildlife management people through the conservation office and try and sort out how we can get them to be more present throughout that area. Time is a big challenge, as I've already alluded to, both on volunteer member availability, and as things grow, it's a pressure on our career staff too, because they're just trying to deal with more things in the same amount of time. So that will be an ongoing pressure as we grow in the community, and not just the city of Parksville, but also the greater fire protection area, where if you've seen, as I mentioned before, in French Creek, the amount of construction out there in single family, I don't know if there's much room left out there, but we've seen major infill in all those areas. And highlights, we have been successful in recruiting 8 new members this year, 3 of them with experience, which is excellent. The Fire Rescue Services technician is making really good progress on our equipment and facility maintenance program, just sort of making it more official and putting it together, as well as pre-incident planning. Pre-incident planning is where we go look at buildings before we have problems in them, so that we have a plan to deal with situations there. The training tower is on site in the training ground. If you haven't had a chance to go take a look at it, it's impressive, and we're excited to start using it. Our aerial ladder replacement project is coming along. The chassis is being built at the chassis plant right now. We've just formed a rescue pumper replacement working group, so in order to create a specification for that truck, which is budgeted for this year. The SCBA replacement project, and the posting I already mentioned to backfill the fire rescue technician. And that's where we're at currently in 2018.
Thank you very much for an excellent and thorough presentation, Chief Norris. Members of council, do we have questions for Chief Norris? Councillor Beale, Councillor Salter, Councillor Oates, and Councillor Patterson, and Councillor Burke.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I did have actually three questions. One is it looking good to have the 2018 objectives completed within the year? It seems that many or most, if not all of them, are in progress. How's that looking for getting it all done?
Yeah, I think we're looking good on that. The delivery times for the apparatus are the only things that are a little bit up in the air. We won't receive either of those apparatus until 2019. The aerial ladder should be early 2019, and depending on when we get the specifications done for the rescue pumper, it'll happen, probably end of the summer. I would imagine delivery will happen, but depending on when we get it ordered. Other than that, we're looking good on the objectives.
My second question is regarding, I noted in the calls for service that there were there was quite an increase in the complaints of burning last year over the year prior. I'm just curious, is there, when this happens, do you note if there are multiples, like the same address is being called more than once? Or I'm just curious about, do people get the message when you need to go out that there's been a complaint about burning, or are there repeat calls for the same address?
The answer is yes, there are repeat calls to the same address, and we do track them. When we deal with three different bylaws and the wildlife management area. So we work with both the bylaw department here in the city of Parksville and in the regional district. When we have repeat calls, we usually try to approach initial calls as education. So we go, we find out what's going on, we advise them of the bylaw regulations, and then ask them to, depending on what the situation is, take appropriate action with the fire, let it burn out or put it out or whatever it may be. If we go a second or a third time, or if the person is uncooperative, then we will refer those to the bylaw departments. And I know both the City of Parksville Bylaw Department and the Regional District are very responsive and very supportive in regards to dealing with those issues. A lot of them are one-offs, though, and we have a lot of people moving here, and they just don't know what the rules are, and we have to fill them in, and some live just inside the city or just outside the city, and so different bylaws apply, and we do our best to inform them and educate them. The other thing is that with the fires we saw 2 years ago in Alberta and last year in the interior of BC, I think that has put it front of mind on everybody what the potential consequences of fires at the wrong time could be. And so I think...
Okay. And this isn't so much a question, but I heard on the program on the radio on CBC the other day that as self-driving cars or, computer-controlled cars are developed and improved and come on the road, that it's quite likely that there will be a decrease and we're talking, down the road here in motor vehicle accidents. So that might help some of the call out and statistics here.
Yeah, motor vehicle accidents do make up a large part of our call volume.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your report. I just have a couple questions. I'm wondering about the densification. As you know, we have a very high densification rate in Parksville, and we will continue to do that. Are you concerned with interface fires with regard to how close the houses are getting to one another? Is that something you're considering or looking into how you guys are going to deal with that? Or?
So in terms of how close houses are to one another, the building code is better addressing that now. And one of the things that we're, I guess, lucky to have in our community is that with these new developments come buildings built to the newer codes. So, we also are one community that has a sprinkler bylaw, so everything that's over a duplex in Parksville is sprinklered. So the sprinklering regulation is in our building bylaw, I believe. And so we're one of about 20 communities in the province that have that. And so that additional bit helps in terms of safety between properties. I'm not overly concerned about the new construction. Where we're vulnerable in new construction is when it's being built, so when it's standing kindling. So as we get more density, which comes with bigger buildings, so more apartment or condominium style structures, I think when you have one being built next to another one and one is fully protected and sprinklered because it's occupied, the other one is being constructed next to it, and it's 3, 4, or 6 stories in height, wood framed. I think the exposure, the main exposure there is when they're under construction. They there's a potential exposure hazard at that point. In terms of interface, in terms of forested area and residential areas, we are very, a lot of those areas are very accessible to us. So we don't have a lot of very large forest areas. We have some large parks and things like that. But even in those, access for firefighting is fairly good. And so we're able to get to things very quickly. Where there's more of a interface with the forest is out in your Arrington, Coombs, Nanoose areas, where that would be. So it's likely that we would be able to see it coming.
And then, thank you. And then my next question is, you were speaking about fires on the beach. And I guess you were talking about the high tide line there where MOE and DFO have their jurisdiction. So when you speak about jurisdiction, though, regardless of that, if there was a fire on the beach, though, would you put it out and then go from there? Or how's that? Or are you not able to put it out?
We would absolutely put it out.
Okay.
We would not hesitate. We get complaints. We always report it to, first of all, we have to ascertain where it is. So we always go look at it. Once we've ascertained it's in the wildlife management area, and that it's not a threat or a safety hazard, then we pass it along and leave it. If we determine that it poses some sort of a safety hazard, then we will put it out and pass it along if it's in the wildlife management area. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Your Worship. First off, Fire Chief Norris, thank you to you and your members. I know when the call goes out, the person on the other end of the line, it's their worst day, and often then it's your best day. And I echo the Mayor's comments about people putting themselves in harm's way. I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. It's also good to hear about that the training tower project that was approved in this council's tenure is finally coming to fruition. It's good to see results from decisions that we've made in the past. So I'm encouraged by that. But I do have a couple of questions. The new aerial truck that's coming, the new aerial ladder truck that's coming, it's a multifaceted question. I guess there are a couple of components to it. How high could that aerial truck service? What's the maximum height of a building that aerial truck could service? And would our current staff require additional training because of that increased height from the, like you mentioned, the 3 to 4 story that's in the current tower for training? But if we, if in Parksville's future, something of a higher than what we have right now came into being, how high could the fire truck service, and would there be additional training required to make that happen?
So, second question first. The staff are all trained to utilize the apparatus. They'll be training on the new piece of equipment. However, we currently operate an aerial apparatus, and so the level of training that's required is already there. In terms of the height of the apparatus, the aerial vertical reach at its maximum extension is 105 feet from tip to ground. So there are a lot of factors depending on, so in a perfect situation, probably a 9-story building, you could service what's there. Dependent on placement, how close you can get the truck, every building's different. Where the aerial apparatus is very effective is on your 3, 4, 5, 6-story buildings. Once you get beyond about 5 stories, you start under the building code, you start to be operating in a high-rise structure. So those are your, anywhere from 10 stories up to, what you get in Vancouver. And at a point, you just can't get an aerial truck high enough. So those buildings are all constructed to do the firefighting from the inside. So in terms of what we have down at the beach currently, we have a 9-story and a 8-story high-rise. Those buildings are all designed to do all your firefighting from inside. Our current aerial truck can reach about 7 stories, 6 stories. The new one would be able to reach to the top of those buildings, the ones that exist. However, primarily what we use that truck for is access for firefighters and overhead water application, or water application up high. So we would try and avoid wherever possible bringing people, residents out there, unless we absolutely had to.
Well, I have another question on another issue, another facet of the service delivery. You talked about your fire protection area and the service area that you currently have, and that includes areas outside the jurisdiction of the City of Parksville. Given the amount of land that's available for future development in the City of Parksville, do you anticipate sometime in the future the need for another fire station?
Are you talking about an additional fire station?
Yes.
So I would say at some point that would be necessary. What we'll have to consider is the fact that currently our fire station is more or less in the center of our fire protection area. We have a long, narrow fire protection area. We run about 6.5, 7 kilometers from in either side of our fire station right now, a little bit further up to the French Creek area. So I could see there is money in the budget in 2020 to do a fire station, fire service study, to restudy the location of the fire station. So.
One last question. A majority of your calls are, I believe you said a lot of your calls were medical distress calls? I don't know if it was majority. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It's about a fifth of our calls, 20%.
Okay, so 50 of your calls,
roughly.
50 of your calls are medical distress calls. Do you keep stats on how many of those are overdoses?
I could go through. I don't keep stats on how many are overdoses. The way the dispatch system works is we get dispatched to the most critical type of calls. So we use the BC ambulance dispatch system. We only go to the highest or most critical level calls, which is about 100 to 120 for us a year, depending on what we're doing. We have, over the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, noticed a slight increase in overdoses. However, we do far more cardiac arrests and strokes and things like that than we do overdose calls. And most overdose calls are happening in people's homes, not that we go to. And I'm sure that BC Ambulance is going to far, far more than we're going to. But a handful a year.
Thank you very much again, Chief Norris.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Chief, for your presentation. It always hits home a little bit. The mandate and your theme and everything is right on. How many intakes do you do in a year? One? New?
Typically, we intake one group a year of new recruits.
And how long a time frame is that?
It takes about 11 months to, with the current occupational health and safety requirements and the requirements to meet minimum levels of training. They're set by the province and adopted by council at the full service level to make somebody usable as a firefighter.
Follow-up, Your Worship. During the intake with Parksville, is it occurring with the same time frame as other jurisdictions in our area?
We've tried that in the past. Currently, no. We have a fairly regimented intake process and training program in order to get people through it. There are various levels of organization out there, I would say, and different service needs, different communities may intake more than once, just depending on their needs. We're not unique in terms of the issues we face trying to get volunteers. volunteerism generally is dropping off a little bit. When you add in, we're asking people to do a job, basically. We're asking them to do a job, a full job where they have to be fully trained. It's not just show up when you want and that sort of stuff. And so it's pretty intense. It amazes me all the time that our members are able to do it with such commitment and dedication to the city and its citizens. But I think every department is a little bit unique in terms of their area and who they're able to draw from and when they need to do recruiting. And also service levels. Our service level is full service here. There's 3 service levels in the province. You have to adopt one. We have a small size city that has, some industrial, we have multi-residential, we have high rises, we have all these things that some of which don't exist out in the more rural areas. And so they're offering a slightly different level of service. So you may be able to train to that level of service slightly quicker than you can here. So there's some differences in how we provide our training.
And 2 more things. Thank you. This weekend I was in the industrial park showing some family around and we stopped and I had to explain a little bit about the fire tower and they were suitably impressed, and I don't think that Parksville toots its own horn enough, because I know that some of your trainers and some of the courses and everything that you've done, and that we are leaders in training.
Well, we're certainly excited to have the opportunity to put the facility into use. We think, there was a day 30 years ago when we could go practice on this building or that building or whatever, and those sort of days are gone when we can go put ladders up on somebody's house or the school or those sorts of things, just liability issues and those sorts of things. We also have to be able to train for the things that we have out in our community. And in order to do that properly, we need to have the facilities so our members can get that experience. And be ready to roll when the time comes. So I think we're very appreciative to have the support of council, to have the building, and we'll be happy to, as soon as it's all ready to go, we'll be happy to have you, host you down there.
Thank you.
I'll try to be brief. Thank you for the work that you do. I echo the sentiments you've heard around the table. And I don't really have a question. It's more of a statement. The big spikes on your calls for service, burning complaints, medical first responder, motor vehicle, and alarms. So alarms, burning, and and motor vehicle incident, I think those are areas where maybe we can do something through doing a better job of communicating with the public. And maybe that's somewhere where we can start to put a bit more attention. You said, and I totally agree, that we've had a huge influx of people over the last several years that maybe aren't aware of some of our, particularly with regard to the burning bylaws. And I said when the RCMP were here, I'll say it again, let's learn how to drive. Let's do 50 down 19A instead of 75. Let's slow down and pay attention so that you don't have to come out and do those sorts of calls, and you can focus on training and doing other calls. Thanks.
Councillor Powell.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I know that every year that I've been on council, we've always heard the struggle with the volunteers and keeping firefighters. Do you see in the near future that we might have a paid firefighters? Do you see that coming down the road? Are we going to get to the place where we won't be able to have enough volunteer firefighters?
I think, when we work in the on-call volunteer firefighter world, we're working on averages. We're trying to have enough people on the roster so that we can, with enough different availability, to get a sufficient amount of people out at any one time when a call comes in. That's a bit of a crapshoot. And, you know, as we try to organize those things into schedules and shifts, it looks more and more like a more organized evolution. We'll have to start paying them more and those sorts of things. We already have a budget for additional fire rescue technicians in 2019, next year, 2021, I believe, 2023, and so on and so forth into the future. We are at the leading edge of a transition from a mostly volunteer operation to a fully composite operation, and sometime in the future into a paid fire service. I think we're many years away from that. The progression, in my mind, will likely be a daytime crew. That's our toughest time to get people. And now the weekends, too. People are very busy, and they like their weekends. They want to spend it with their families and things, and they go away camping, and they do all those things, and it's getting tougher to get people on the weekends. So I see it going from a Monday to Friday daytime crew, so 4 people roughly as a fire crew, minimum, augmented by on-call staff, and then, you know, 7 days a week, and then eventually down the road into, you know, a fire service similar to something like Port Alberni or Esquimalt, where you have, you know, 20 or so paid staff and 20 or 30 on-call staff to augment them.
And so maybe that's something we can look at when we look at another fire station. Is that part of that review, or have you even talked about it?
Well, I think the scope of that full review is yet to be determined. We've put some money aside in 2020, and we'll have to work on what the entire scope is. But I think certainly as we come into our next strategic planning round, we need to take a hard look at that and start to flush out the staffing plan so we're ready and we're ahead of the curve and not behind it.
Thank you very much, Chief Norris. And I, following up on Councillor Powell's question, we have to always remember that we have to thank the employers that allow their staff. So if it's time for another thank you letter, please let me know. I'll let Ms. Comas talk to you about that. But anytime you feel that that's the time to do it, I'll be glad to do it, because we have to remember that the employers in our area are very generous with their contribution to the community too, in allowing their staff to go off at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon to leave work to go to a fire. So I'd like to hear from you about that.
Yeah, I think it's certainly most of the members whose employers allow them to come to emergency calls certainly appreciate having a letter sent in recognition of that. So I think that's certainly something that we could do. Again, as we get busier, though, it's a similar story. When I joined the fire department in 1990, if you left work once a week to go to a fire call or once every couple of weeks, it was no big deal. Now it can be 2-3 times in a day, and that's a pretty big impact on an employer. And the ask is getting big. Is really what it comes down to.
No doubt about it. So I don't want you to go away, because you're next, and I can take all these 3 recommendations together, Mrs. Comas. I need a mover and a seconder for the award of the self-contained breathing apparatus replacement project. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. So, Chief Norris, do you want to give us the background on this, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the purpose of this report was to request council approval for the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department to enter into a purchase supply agreement with a proponent to supply self-contained breathing apparatus, otherwise known as SCBA, and the associated equipment. A request for proposals was issued seeking a qualified proponent to provide the Scott X3 Pro self-contained breathing apparatus, and associated accessories. Fire department staff believes an acceptable offer has been received from Gillivan International Company and recommends entering into the contract to purchase supply as outlined in the submitted proposal received via email at the fire department on May 22nd. Gillivan International Company is a local fire service authorized distributor for the 3M owned Scott Fire and Safety line, including the subject SCBA and accessories. Funding is identified in the 2018 Fire Department minor capital budget allocation in the amount of $325,000 towards the replacement of this safety equipment.
Questions for Chief Norris? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. And so I did read the report, and you said it says here some of them are 40 years old.
That's correct.
And then you've got the update cycle is typically on a 5-year timeline, and there's some that are over 10, like they're in the last time by the it says the last purchase of 5 SCBA units, 2002 standard by the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department was 10 years ago, 3 standard cycles. And so this isn't a judgment. I'm just curious. Doesn't that put the firefighters at risk?
I wouldn't say it puts them at risk. What we have currently in the 24 air packs, the SCBA, the units that we're using, is we have a cross-section all the way from 40 years old to 10 years old of all different, so they update the standard every 5 years. So as they update the consensus standard, all the manufacturers have to meet that standard and bring their units into compliance with that standard. So what we have is we have a whole bunch of different air packs that are at various different standards levels. And, you know, I should say that we've gotten, and one of the reasons we want to go back to Scott is because we've had outstanding service from that product. Like, we've really gotten our money's worth out of these air packs. And you know, the cost of service and maintenance over time on them is outstanding. However, there have been some very significant changes in the standard which we are just not up to, and we want to provide our firefighters going forward for at least the next 15 years, maybe more. I would suggest we could probably get more of these. We want to provide them with the most current, up-to-date, and uniform standard across the board, so they're all the same. Right now we have certain ones that have this and don't have that, and you know.
And so it's safe to say then that they're following WCB standards?
Absolutely, they're following fire service standards.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think you mentioned in the report that the PST was 28,000 over, or 28,000 over the budget, and that the thermal imaging camera is not a necessary purchase. But you did, like you had requested it, but then said, but it's not, you know, like we don't have to do that, we won't go over. But do you not think that, would you not think that you would be requiring these in the future though? Like, would you be anticipating needing this thermal imaging camera, the 4 escape packs, and 1 or 2 SCBA units? I mean, these are the things you're saying, well, we can turf those and we'll be okay, but do you not anticipate requiring these at any rate? And would the price on the cost of these items increase between then and now?
Yes, the cost will increase. The thermal imaging camera we put in there as an option because we wanted to see what the pricing was on the camera, so we put it into the RFP. It's not a requirement. It's not an actual SCBA unit. The escape packs, the SCA packs, are for confined space rescue, and the packs that we have they're quite old, but they are you know, they're functional, and you know, if council wishes to approve the purchase of those at this time, they will get more expensive over time. We did look at rebudgeting those particular pieces of equipment in the next budget cycle. Does that make sense?
Follow up?
I want to confirm. Yeah, so just to clarify, so you will be requesting these items in the next budget cycle at any rate.
Yeah, that was our plan.
Okay, so and that's not that far off.
Councillor Burton.
So there was a purchase of some thermal imaging equipment, I'm going to say maybe 5 years ago, and you went out to some service clubs and got some funding for that. Have you thought about doing that in this round?
We make regular appearances at the service clubs. The issue becomes once they're really required firefighting equipment now. Back when we approached service clubs for the initial thermal imaging camera purchases, which was at least 5 years ago, if not more than that, maybe closer to 10. You know, they were sort of a new thing, and we didn't have those in the inventory. Now we have them in the inventory. They are, you know, we have 5 thermal imaging cameras in service, and they are, I would consider them to be part of the regular budgeting cycle now. We certainly could go ask for money for them. Not only will we need to add more of them, but we will need to start replacing them also at some point. Does that
follow up
answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. I'm sure my Rotary Club would receive a request, and I think maybe the other Rotary Club would probably receive a request, and maybe we could help you out with 1 or 2 of those.
We could certainly be happy to do that.
Okay, Council, we're going to call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much, Chief Norris. It's been a very informative evening. I'll have to come more often. There's lots to cover. Okay. Council, the next report we have is the consideration of a development permit for a parking lot expansion at 180 and 188 Hearst Avenue West. First of all, I can take all the 7 recommendations. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue?
If I may, Your Worship, for council consideration is a development permit with some minor variances to facilitate a parking lot on the 2 subject properties. It's increasing the number of parking spaces pretty substantially, but as a peculiarity of the bylaw, the requirements actually increase, so there's a number of variances as a result of that. Further details are provided in the report, and the recommendations are as per the agenda.
Any questions for Mr. Russell, Mr. Burton, Councillor Burton, and Councillor Powell?
What's the impact on the lane?
I'm not unaware of any impact on the lane specifically. Can you be more specific?
Sorry, we're going to see possibly an increase in traffic. We've discussed the laneway that runs from the parking lot through to the Alberni Highway on other development and variance requests. Just wondering if there's going to be an increase in traffic on that lane as a result of this parking request, and whether that's going to have any impact on the safety at the Alberni Highway exit.
If I may, worship through to Councillor Burton, I'm really not in a position to answer that. There will be additional access provided to Hearst Avenue. All this application is really approving is, basically how pretty the landscaping, et cetera, is. So as I said, but there will be direct access to Hearst Avenue. So if people, if there's a lineup of cars on the lane, conceivably people would take the easier route, which would be Hearst Avenue, where the 2 access points are.
So it may actually take some pressure off of that exit?
If I'm worship through to Councillor Burton, it is entirely conceivable that it could. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can say that I would be more than happy to see an increase in the parking spots at SOS. I've tried to go in and out of there numerous times, and it's crazy. So I think this is a good idea.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. To our Director of Community Planning, will this have a traffic study attached to it at a later date?
If I may, worship through to Councillor Patterson, that's beyond the scope of this kind of application. Council is really looking at the if it's happy with the landscaping, those kinds of items. So unless the city is willing to undertake something at its own expense, there would be no obligation on the landowner to provide such a report.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. Okay, the next item is the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 20116222 Corfield. This is to receive for information and to receive. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report was prepared by the Director of Planning and myself, and it's intended to provide a summary of the zoning amendment process to date and to facilitate public and council review of the land use related materials pertinent to Amendment Bylaw number 2000.116 in advance of the public hearing, which is scheduled for June 19th, 2018 at 6 p.m. in the PCCC. Staff recommendations are to receive the report and the public comments submitted in advance of public hearing notice for information.
Any questions for Mrs. Kaler? Pretty straightforward. All those in favor of the recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. Next, Mrs. Kaler, once again, video surveillance policy amendment. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Burden. Mrs. Kaler, once again, would you give us the background on the video surveillance policy amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a public body, the city is subject to the provisions of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which we usually refer to as FIPA. For safety and security purposes, the city installed surveillance cameras at a number of its facilities, and Council approved policy number 3.36 in February of 2017, which provides guidelines on the purpose of these cameras, clarifies who can access the footage captured on the cameras, and identifies locations for the cameras through posted signage. Since Council's original approval, the policy has required an amendment to facilitate the addition of surveillance equipment at the fire hall. And there is currently a request from staff to use surveillance equipment at the Springwood pump station, and it is anticipated additional cameras will be needed at the Englishman River water intake and the new drinking water treatment facility. Staff requests that Council approve a modification to the policy that would remove the table which lists the details about the location and the types of equipment, but would continue to provide public notice of surveillance through signage and provide employee awareness of the equipment through labour management meetings. A copy of active equipment will be maintained in the Administrative Services Department and would be available upon request. And recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Kaler? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right. Once again, Mrs. Kaler, I need this is a report to be received. I need a mover and a seconder to receive. Councillor Burden, Councillor Powell. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on the issue of regulatory options for legalizing cannabis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This staff report provides the results of a public engagement exercise on recreational cannabis activities, which took place in March of 2018. The report also presents a number of options on regulating cannabis activities within the City of Parksville. As Council is aware, the senior levels of government will be regulating many of the aspects of the industry, but there are two key areas where municipalities have jurisdiction, which include regulation of land use and business operations. This is done through the zoning and business license bylaws, respectively. Staff, on direction of Council, formed a technical committee with representation from several municipal departments and members of the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department and the Oceanside RCMP. The committee met a number of times and reviewed options being pursued in other Canadian cities and in U.S. cities where recreational cannabis has been legal for some time. The committee also turned its mind to the existing capacity and resources available to develop, implement, and enforce municipal regulations. Staff prepared a detailed table which outlines some of the benefits and challenges associated with the different regulatory tools. Sample wording for Council motions is included in Attachment 3, but it should be noted that staff is not recommending a particular suite of regulations with that wording, but they're providing it for assistance in case councillors would like to use that wording when making motions on each of the elements of the regulatory system that are discussed. One of the key items staff is requesting, however, is Council consideration for an effective date of January 1st, 2019, in order to permit staff to prepare the necessary amendments and supporting procedures and forms to support the regulatory framework that Council does approve. And recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you very much, by the way, for a very thorough report, which gives out a good deal of reasonable options. Any questions for Mrs. Kaler? Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Worship. So I'm just curious. I'm not curious. I really appreciate the report, and I think that it needs to have some, for myself, I'd like to review it more thoroughly and have a more thorough discussion with Council to decide what we're going to do. I think we need to come out ahead of this before it is actually legalized. And for me, if we had the groundwork laid out, or at least started that groundwork, so is the rest of Council open to setting a day, another meeting date to discuss it? I think that would be beneficial. Can I make that motion?
Councillor Oates?
Oh, we're on a motion on the floor.
Councillor Oates?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you very much. And echoing Councillor Powell's, the sentiment of Councillor Powell's remarks there, it was my intention to, after we dealt with this motion, to make some sort of motion that it would come back, but I'll defer to Councillor Powell for that. I think it's important that we spend some time before we come forward with a motion there and have some discussions with staff. There's a draft motion for Council's consideration. But I believe that I too would like some more time, and maybe we spoke in the past about dedicating certain meetings to certain issues, and this one is certainly, I think, deserves that we spend a little bit more time to do so. So I look forward to Councillor Powell's motion after this motion to refer it to another meeting.
Okay, Councillor Burton?
Just out of curiosity, do we have any indication of the province's timeline? We've got an indication of the federal government timeline, but what's the province doing? Because that is going to determine some of this, I would think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Burden. I attended a session with the Cannabis Secretariat recently at the LGMA, and I had a number of questions for that poor person who was standing there. They are indicating that regulations will come out in the fall. That was as definitive as we could receive the information. I did ask some questions about resources as well for enforcement and was told that that would be pending the regulations. So in my opinion as staff, I think Council should not feel rushed. There is still quite a bit of time for the senior levels of government, and things are evolving almost daily. As you may know, the bill went through the Senate, but the Senate is recommending some changes as well. So I don't personally think, from all of the different experts I've spoken to at both levels, that anything will be made legal until at least September, most likely, probably later than that.
And you heard Staff Sergeant Pelletier telling us tonight that this DRE training is yet to be well underway, so there's some challenges there. Okay, can I call the vote on to be received? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Now, Councillor Powell, you have a motion tonight.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to make a motion that Council dedicate one full meeting, say the first meeting in September, to discuss this particular issue and give it a fulsome discussion.
What date is that?
Your Worship, to clarify, are you talking about usurping a regular council meeting for that, or a special council meeting date? You want a special council meeting date for this?
Okay. The first council meeting in September is on the 5th, and we go to UBCM the following week, so we'll have to pick a date. Okay. I have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry.
You have a question?
I maybe missed the answer on that. Is this taking the place of a regular council meeting, or is this an additional meeting?
It'll be an extra.
Okay, thank you.
So you'll select a date? Never. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, Council, we've come to the end of the regular meeting. We're going to be moving into camera. I need a motion to go into camera.